Manifest it. Be mindful. Hustle harder. Rewire your limiting beliefs. Process your trauma, and now regulate your nervous system. Every few years, there seems to be a new answer, a new missing piece, a new thing that promises to explain why you feel the way you do and why change hasn't stuck. So, what's actually different about this one? Welcome to Human Evolution, the podcast where growth gets real, patterns get exposed, and things start to look a little different. I'm Jodie Tala, integrative neuroregulation coach and the founder of MindDrop. This is where we have the conversations that don't always get said out loud, unpacking emotional regulation, neuroscience, and the patterns shaping how you think, feel, and show up in the world, and what it really takes to change. For the self-aware, heart-led humans and high performers who are done running on autopilot and ready to live life on purpose. Let's go. So let's start with why nervous system regulation is suddenly everywhere. If you're in your 30s or 40s, you've probably lived through several eras of personal development already. There was manifestation. Get your thoughts and frequency right and your life will follow. Then there was mindfulness. Slow down, be present in the now, stop running on autopilot. Then came the hustle culture, which told us that the answer was output, work harder, want it more, grind your way there. Then mindset became the missing piece. Change your beliefs, change the story, reframe the thought. Every one of those approaches had something useful. Your thoughts do influence how you behave. Mindfulness can build awareness and effort matters. Beliefs shape what you notice, what you expect, and what you allow yourself to pursue. They're all good. The problem was never that those things were completely wrong. The problem was that they were often presented as the whole answer, the whole solution. You could meditate for 20 minutes and feel completely peaceful, then walk into one emotionally charged conversation and lose access to every calm, wise thing that you knew. You could understand your limiting beliefs and still watch yourself make the same decision under a heightened state or under pressure. You could know that rest was important and still feel edgy, guilty, or even unsafe the second that you stopped moving. Then trauma entered the mainstream conversation. People started talking more openly about burnout and attachment theory and triggers and the way past experiences shape present behavior. The body began receiving a little bit more attention. And out of that came the language of nervous system regulation. Now it's in podcast episodes just like this one, Instagram captions, breathwork videos, and wellness programs pretty much across the board. The language of this spread really quickly. The understanding of it, however, running underneath it hasn't always kept up. Because nervous system regulation is often reduced to one kind of small idea, which is like calm down. Have a calm and peaceful nervous system always. And that is not what nervous system regulation actually means. Your autonomic nervous system is constantly responding to what's happening around you and inside of you. So part of that system helps mobilize you. Example, your heart rate increases, your attention narrows, blood and energy are directed towards action. You become more alert and ready to respond. This is often associated with fight or flight, although our protective responses can also include freezing, shutting down, and appeasing. Then there are processes that support rest, digestion, connection, and restoration. And you need to access both. Activation in our bodies or our nervous system responding to something is not a malfunction. You're meant to become activated when something requires your energy or urgency, focus, or protection. This is a good thing. If a car pulls out in front of you, you don't want your body calmly considering its options for the next 10 minutes. You want that reaction. If you're presenting on stage or having a difficult conversation or doing something that really matters to you, a little bit of activation is completely normal. The question is what happens next and how do we handle it? So your body has a baseline that it tends to organize itself around. It won't remain completely or perfectly still because life doesn't remain perfectly still. We have ebbs and flows always. Something happens and your nervous system needs to rise to meet whatever that thing is. And when that moment is past, it begins making its way back into that baseline. So that movement is a big part of that regulation. You can kind of think of it as a bit of a wave. You can activate when life demands it, right? So that means that your nervous system is doing something. It's coming off that baseline, right? And you can stay connected enough to respond to it and then recover when that demand is over. Regulation is flexibility. It's being able to move through different states without becoming permanently stuck in one of them, whichever way it is. So a regulated person can still feel anger. They can still feel anxiousness too. They can still get hurt, overwhelmed, excited, disappointed, and tired. Regulation doesn't remove emotion from your life, or it shouldn't. It certainly shouldn't be taught that way. It gives you more room to experience emotion without immediately being hijacked by it or needing to shut it down. So you can notice anger without letting it make every decision. You can feel discomfort in a conversation and remain present enough to hear what is actually being said. You can have a really stressful morning without carrying the psychological urgency into every interaction for the rest of the week. And you can respond to an actual emergency, and when it's over, allow your body to recognize that it's over and you're okay and you're safe. And I see that a lot of people are struggling with this concept of regulation and then getting stuck in it. The demand passes, but the nervous system keeps running. So you're home, but your shoulders are still up around your ears. You're so tense. That conversation finished hours ago, but your mind is rewriting it when you're in the shower. The deadline's being met. Your body is already looking for the next thing that could go wrong. Or even you've been running like at full speed for so long that instead of feeling energized by it, you begin to feel flat, disconnected, or heavy and unable to get moving again. So regulation is not staying calm through all of that. It's about having enough flexibility and being able to adapt enough to move and return from the baseline. So this is where we need to separate regulation from capacity because they are related and they are something that works synergistically with one another, but they're not the same thing. So regulation is what your nervous system does in the moment, right? So something happens and your body responds. Can you move through that activation and find your way back to baseline? Capacity, however, is how much your system can actually hold before it becomes overwhelmed or we start tipping into either side of that activation. Because you can feel heightened and angry, or you can feel burned out and shut down. It kind of goes both ways. You might have heard of the psychological concept or theory called the window of tolerance. It's going to get its own episode later on because it's actually really fun to go into. But for now, I want to just have you think of it as a range in which where you feel stress, emotion, and activation while still having access to yourself and your brain, right? You're still online. You can think, you can communicate, you can make choices when you're in this space. You can remain connected to what's actually happening, so you're present. But when that range, so say if you have a range like this, right, you're quite wide. And your baseline's in the middle of this range, and you can go up and down through that range, no problems. But when your range is narrower, right, smaller things can push beyond what it can comfortably process. So like you don't have as much room to make those movements off baseline, right? So the reaction may be intense. You might go straight into fighting or escaping, appeasing, potentially even overthinking or say shutting down. And it can take a long time to recover back to baseline. Even though it's narrow, you can end up getting stuck on the sides a lot easier. When that range is wider, more can happen in that space without immediately tipping into that survival mode. You still feel it and you're not unaffected, but you simply have more room around that experience. And that room is what we call capacity. And this is why a regulation tool can work perfectly well and still not create a lasting shift on its own, because the regulation is one thing, the capacity to hold the thing is another. So you do the breathing exercise, your heart rate settles, you feel your feet on the floor, you come back, you're in the room, and that is your regulation. But then another stressful thing happens 2 hours later and you tip just as quickly. It doesn't mean that the tool failed, it actually worked quite well. But it means that the tool helped you return in that moment, but the amount that your system, that your body could hold hasn't necessarily changed yet. So the capacity that you have is a smaller range. And capacity is built more slowly and it is cumulative. And this is the part where I start to get really excited, because it's where regulation and capacity begin feeding each other. So every time you experience an activation without being completely overwhelmed and your nervous system successfully returns, you come back to that beautiful baseline, you receive new evidence. I can feel this and I can stay here. I can remain here. I'm with myself. I can move through different discomfort without losing myself along the way or going into a full activated mode, whether that be a more of a fiery one or more of a kind of cooler one. And we'll talk about what that actually means in an episode dedicated to the window of tolerance. So in that moment, the conversation can be hard, but it doesn't become dangerous, right? So over time, those experiences can help make the activation less intense and the recovery more accessible, and the range becomes wider. So regulation does help in the moment, but repeated supported regulation can contribute to building capacity over time. So let's make this practical. I would like for you to meet Mia. Mia is in her mid-30s. She's capable, she's emotionally aware, and she's very good at showing up for other people. She's done therapy, she knows her patterns. From the outside, she's functioning really well. Underneath that, her nervous system has been running hard for a very long time. We're going to look at this in different domains across Mia's life. So in her health, Mia has been getting tension headaches by the middle of the week. Her sleep is patchy and she wakes up quite often tired. And there's this resonance within her body where she sits somewhere between anxious and exhausted. She knows she needs to slow down, but the moment that she tries, something inside her becomes a little bit restless. She starts thinking about everything that needs to be done, everyone relying on her, everything that might fall apart if she stops holding it together. So she keeps going until her body makes that decision for her. Ever had that happen where your body basically puts you on your butt and you can't do anything? You'll get sick or something will happen and you're forced to rest? With more regulation and capacity, Mia doesn't suddenly become a person who never gets tired or stressed, but she notices that tension earlier. She can feel that her jaw is clenched before it actually becomes a headache. She can respond to the signal before it has to become a full-blown siren. And when her body tells her to slow down, she has enough internal room to listen without immediately interpreting the rest as danger or laziness or even failure. So she's in the same body. It's the exact same signals that are playing out, but she can receive them earlier. She's got more range. Now let's move over to the domain of relationships. Mia's partner makes a passing comment. It isn't particularly cruel or dramatic, but something about the tone lands sharply with her. So her guard dog, if you remember, the amygdala, reacts before her CEO, which is her thinking brain, has made sense of what's even happened, and she snaps back. Or she does the complete opposite. Her voice goes soft and she smooths it over and tells herself it isn't worth making a thing out of. Either way, she isn't fully in that conversation anymore. Her protective response is. Later that night, she replays it. What do they mean? Why did I say that? Why didn't I say this? Should I bring it up again? Did I overreact? With greater capacity, she still feels that comment land. And there's a flicker of activation. But there's just a little bit more room between the sensation and the reaction. Enough room for her to say, hey, that landed strangely for me. What did you mean by that? And actually bring it up in the moment. She can stay in that discomfort long enough to hear the answer. Maybe it was careless, or maybe there's something real that needs to be addressed. But whatever that answer is, she can deal with the conversation that she's actually having rather than the one that her nervous system is expecting. And then the conversation ends and it doesn't follow her to bed or the next day or roll over into the next week. So let's look at money and business. Mia's business has a strong month. Good money comes in. And on paper, this is exactly what she's been working towards. And her nervous system immediately begins scanning. What if next month is terrible? Or what if it disappears? What if the money just goes away? Should I take the client I already know is not a good fit just in case? Should I hold all of the money back because paying myself feels risky? Her decisions look cautious and responsible on the surface, but underneath they're actually being shaped by her nervous system that finds uncertainty difficult to hold. So with more regulation and capacity, that uncertainty still exists. She isn't guaranteed another strong month. And her body might still feel a little flicker of fear when she looks at the numbers, but she can hold the good result and the uncertainty at the same time. She can still pay herself. She can decline work that would cost more than it actually brings in, whether that be financially, emotionally, bandwidth, what have you, in scope creep and all of that. She can make a strategic decision without fear disguising itself as strategy. You see, Mia isn't a completely different person in either of these versions. Life is still life. People say things badly. Bodies can get tired. Business remains uncertain. The difference is how much can she hold without the protective responses taking over the entire show. So how do you actually build this? It doesn't happen through information alone. Understanding your nervous system can help. It gives the CEO a map and it helps you recognize what is happening and can remove some of that confusion. But a map is not the same thing as traveling the road. Your nervous system changes through experience. The first condition is enough safety. We're not talking about perfect safety because I'm not entirely sure that actually exists, but enough safety for your nervous system and your body and your mind to remain present while something new is happening. That might mean the pace of the work is manageable, or it might mean that you trust the person that's supporting you. It might mean you have choice and boundaries and the ability to pause. So there's some skill building that you have access to. When a person is pushed far beyond what they can process, the nervous system isn't necessarily learning flexibility. It may simply be learning that this experience is overwhelming too. So another condition to this, to building capacity and regulation, is within relationship. So we first learn regulation through other people. A baby does not regulate itself through positive thinking. It borrows cues from the nervous systems around it, from the people. We have mirror neurons for this as well. So voice, touch, facial expression, rhythm, presence. We don't completely grow out of that. A steady, attuned person can help another person's nervous system settle enough to stay present. That can happen in therapy, coaching, friendship, partnership, in community, although those relationships each have their own different roles and boundaries. Self-regulation is still important, but so is co-regulation because we are built for both. The third condition to building capacity and regulation is working in both directions. And what I mean by that is top-down work uses thought and language, reflection, perspective, meaning making. And bottom-up works with the body, sensation, breath, movement, emotional activation, and the automatic responses that often arrive before conscious thought. So some people need more work through one direction than the other at different times. This is where having someone like a coach or a therapist is quite handy. But when a pattern is showing up as an immediate physiological reaction, the insight alone may not be enough to change it. And this is where the body needs an experience that differs from what it expects. The guard dog needs evidence, not a PowerPoint presentation. And then there's repetition. So one safe conversation can be really powerful. And one moment where you hold a boundary and survive the discomfort can really shift something. But the capacity is usually built through enough repetitions that the experience becomes more familiar to the nervous system. The new response stops feeling like a strange scenic route that you have to consciously navigate, which the brain doesn't like to do because the brain is fast and efficient and therefore kind of lazy and takes the quick road all the time, right? The highway. But over time, it becomes easier to access because you're building a new road. And this is the cool thing, because when the more that you build that road and you focus on that, the easier it becomes. And all of a sudden, 6 months down the track or even less than, it's your new highway. And this is what we focus on inside of Mind Drop. It's not just calming yourself after the pattern has already taken over. Important skills to have, by the way. But we're building the conditions that help you respond differently when life is actually happening. And this is through education, body-based work, emotional processing, reflection, repetition, and connection. And it's not all at once or as another performance, but think of it more like a guided practice. So back to the question that we began with. Why is nervous system regulation different? The quick take is because it isn't asking you to throw away everything that came before it. You're never going to not have a nervous system. Mindfulness still has value. Thoughts and beliefs still matter, and therapy can be life-changing. Rest, habits, purpose, and effort all have a place. However, your nervous system and its regulation gives us a way to understand why those things sometimes work really brilliantly and why sometimes they seem to disappear the second that life becomes emotionally charged or challenging. Every approach you use has to land somewhere in a living body. Your ability to think clearly, communicate, connect, recover, perform, and change behavior is shaped by the state of the nervous system that's doing the thinking, communicating, and performing. That doesn't make nervous system regulation the answer to every human problem, granted, but it does make it a foundational part of how we adapt. The algorithm will move on. It always does. We've seen that time and time again. The language might change. However, you will always have a nervous system. So what is nervous system regulation? It's your ability to respond to what life brings, to move through the activation and recover when the moment has passed. And capacity is the amount of stress, emotion, uncertainty, and experience that your whole body and nervous system can hold whilst you still have access to yourself. You build both through safe enough experiences, relationship work that includes the mind and the body with repetition over time. Integration is really important. And the goal remains to become more available to yourself whilst you're living life, not becoming untouched by life or having to remain calm 24/7. It's to remain more available to yourself whilst you're going through the ebbs and the flows. So coming up on the next episode of Human Evolution, we're going to take this one step further, because even when you know how you want to handle something, you can still hear yourself say the wrong thing, shut down, over-explain or react before you've had time to think. So we're going to talk about why it is that you respond differently than what you intend to, and what is actually happening in those few seconds before the CEO gets a say. I'll see you there. Hey, my beautiful friend. Thanks for hanging out and listening to today's episode. If you want to keep the momentum going, head over to minddrophq.com/podcast. It's where all the tools, resources, and gold from the show are kept, so your growth doesn't stop when the episode ends. If this episode sparks something in you, share it with a friend or someone who needs to hear this. The more people having these conversations, the bigger the ripple we create. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. It really means the world. Until next time, keep being your gorgeous, unstoppable self.